It's Tuesday, the 11th of November 2014. My name's Robin Yellow, and this is Ecotastic. And looking at this week's news, as always, is Kit Knowles.
Good evening, everybody.
How you doing, Kit? How's things?
Very good, very good. It was an interesting week. I'm learning about, well, I'm actually being trained as a Green Deal advisor this week. So I'm doing EPCs and GDAs, which I'll explain a little bit more, I think, about later on in the show.
EPCs and GDAs. They sound like wonderful TLAs, three-letter acronyms.
It's pretty much, you wouldn't believe, those courses are just absolutely rammed with them. Every other word is an acronym.
Well, are three-letter acronyms an excuse for blinding people with tech or complex words just for the sake of it, or do they have a place? I mean, I suppose they speed up the conversation.
There's a little bit of the efficiency, but mainly it's a protectionist attitudes. If you know all the lingo and nobody else does, then nobody else can muscle in on your business. Well, so it's like, I think it's the between all these GDA, these Green Deal assessors, they're able to speak like this to one another. It's I guess it's a huge part of the course as well. You're learning all of these terms as you go through it.
Yeah, well, as you know, I'm a project and program manager by profession, and a lot of the training that I've done, both for the Project Management Institute and also for Prince, has been about learning a vocabulary so I can speak the same language as the people I'm working with, and it removes ambiguity from the conversation, which is actually the basis of clear communication, of course.
All right, sounds good. I didn't realise there was such value to them. They're just blooming annoying.
No, I agree. And if you ever want to mystify a subject, just throw an acronym in.
Absolutely, surefire way.
Okay, well, shall we get on with the news?
Let's do this.
Okay, well, in that case, let's start with a This Is Money Co.uk article this week. Energy Secretary Ed Davey is planning to bail out the troubled Green Deal finance company, which was on the brink of collapse. The flagship Green Deal scheme, part of the government's key home insulation program, allows householders to make energy-saving improvements, including the installation of double glazing. The cost of work is repaid through a charge added to the homeowner's energy bills. However, under the scheme, this has proved to be very unpopular. What's going on here, Kit?
Well, this was something I learned about during the training, basically, that this is the kind of the largest statistic to say that the Green Deal has flopped. So this was, I think this is something devised by the Labour government before last, but it was something really that's been the baby of the Conservatives, and they brought through, and it's been quite unsuccessful. I think there's two things I wanted to talk about. One was the actual information that's being given there in that article relates to the fact that there's a massive kind of void in uptake that they did not see coming. So I think they've done hundreds of thousands of surveys, but the actual number of people taking the Green Deal is very, very few, 4,000 something. And the reason that's really important is because that's basically telling you that people are taking the information but not using the financing. They're wanting to finance it themselves or go privately. It's telling them that they've got it wrong, basically. All the formulae in there aren't working. The golden rule that they like to band around doesn't seem to be working. Everybody's very afraid of it, and probably quite rightly so. So in Germany, they've got the Green Deal, and every homeowner pretty much exclusively is taking this thing up, and it's on the basis that they're doing it without debt. They're doing free, interest-free loans.
Well, is the Green Deal just a loan from the government?
It is just a loan, and it's quite scary because, for starters, people don't think it is a loan. Then they do the process, go through the process, realise as part of the process you have to make it very clear that it is a loan, sort of 5.5% APR. So once they're going through all of that, this is what's scaring people off. They realise there's actually absolutely no guarantees that not only will they not see the savings, but that their bills will be going up all at the same time. So,
well, of course, there are no guarantees in life. And talking of life, especially as the way it is lived in the Netherlands, the world's first solar path is set to open in the Netherlands this week. On Wednesday, the Solar Road will run through Amsterdam's northern suburb of Krommenie and will feature concrete slabs embedded with solar panels to convert energy from the sun into electricity from the grid. Now, Kit, the Solar Road project's been around since 2009, so it's certainly been around a few years. What are the problems with these sorts of schemes, and how do they work?
Yeah, I got very interested in the solar roadways, or the solar freaking roadways, which is, as it's known in the US, which is, I think, again, a project that's been around for a very long time. I think they were devised in 2007, and it's ongoing, and obviously the Netherlands have beat them to a live installation, which is why they're everywhere. And I don't know much about the cycle lane here in the Netherlands, but the case with the US, I've got a lot of information, and I wrote into the guy, giving him a lot of hints and tips and information that he could hopefully use and integrate into his systems. I mean, broadly speaking, all it's doing is it's replacing our road infrastructure. In this case, it's replacing a bike infrastructure, but what this enables is a huge number of ideas that can be brought into the reality through the utilization of renewable energy. So the road surface itself is a kind of a rough glass, and that kind of toughened rough glass can take huge amounts of compressive weight, but it also allows light to pass through the road and therefore hit some solar cells, which can generate electricity. Now, some of the uses of this is...
When you say solar cells, of course, you're talking about photovoltaics.
Yeah, PV cells sort of embedded in the road. But one of the well, loads of beneficial uses of this, for starters, you're generating a huge amount of energy. This energy can now be distributed along the street that the road is actually set in. It can also carry things like Ethernet. So the internet can be distributed via Wi-Fi spots all the way along the infrastructure. You can also do very special things within the actual panels themselves. So the solar roadways have LEDs mounted in them, and they're pressure sensitive. So if you get sort of animals walking across the road, it can interpret that these are animals on the road and can give warning signs to drivers coming up towards the animals to tell them to slow down, there's something on the road. They can mount ice, so you don't get snow and other sort of slip hazards forming on them. And I've been thinking about all sorts of other options as well. You can use them to carry huge amounts of water, to use excess solar power to rectify that water and distribute that. So you can use it as kind of a services conduit throughout a town, having massive benefits. It would be really, really exciting, but very expensive to install.
Well, yes, and I think you can apply that to a lot of these green technologies. They are expensive to install. It's a new way of doing business, and therefore it's going to cost. Phys.org reports researchers from North Carolina State University and Hong Kong University of Science and Technology have found that temperature-controlled aggregation in a family of new semiconducting polymers is the key to creating high-efficiency organic solar cells that can be mass-produced more cheaply. Their findings also open the door to experimentation with different chemical mixtures that comprise the active layers of the cells. Now, in the pre-show, Kit, you tried to explain this to me, and my head exploded. Fortunately, I grew a new one. What's going on here? How does this work?
Yes, it's something that people have been trying to work on for a long time, is sort of organic solar cells. This is, I guess, more aligned with sort of photosynthesis. They've been focused on dyes for years. I'm not sure if I mentioned it previously, but for instance, GE developed a printer ink that you could put into a standard inkjet printer and feed in a kind of piece of paper which have wires on them, and you could basically print your own PV cells. Which was quite an attractive thought. It was obviously the ultimate in low-cost production.
Sorry, just say that again. You're saying you can print your own PV cells with an inkjet printer?
Literally, you could put in a special dye developed by GE into a standard inkjet printer, put in a piece of paper which has some wires embedded on them, and print your own solar cell. Then I guess you'd laminate it and you could shove it wherever you want and generate electricity. So that's something that GE's been working on for years, and there's all sorts of, and that's a dye-based technology, so it's very low efficiency. And that's the main stumbling block for it, really. But what we're doing here is we're trying to create PV cells with materials that aren't in their own right non-sustainable. So most of our PV cells use things like galamide and other elements which are very rare, very difficult to.
Sorry, what was that? Galamide?
Yeah, I think that's the right element. I might be getting it wrong, but there's basically three very very rare resources, elements that go into the manufacture of solar cells. So it's obviously silicon, very common, very popular.
Is it gallium arsenide?
Gallium, that's the one. Sorry, the gallium is the big issue in terms of renewability, because of course it's a very limited and very expensive element to include. So the big breakthrough that they're trying to make at the moment is with organic PV cells, in that they're using sort of carbon-based structures, so you can break away from these cripplingly expensive and rare elements. So what they're using with this one is a fullerene molecule, which is a carbon complex basically. And they're effectively trying to create very low-cost PV. It's not very efficient, as you can see, but then who cares about efficiency if you've got massive price drops?
What's the efficiency?
It's about 10.8%. Whereas if you go to the extreme end of our current PV tech, then you're around about 28 to 30% really.
So in that case, that raises the obvious question: what's so great about this research?
So the thing that's great about, well, I'm not sure about specifically this research, but the thing that's great about organic solar cells is that they would enable us to maintain a limitless scale of manufacture going forwards. We could literally continually produce these things without having any effects on the environment, because currently the manufacturing effects from PV cells at its current scale is not an issue at all, but could become one in the future.
Okay, great. Well, it's that time of the show where we move on to Kit's Tech Corner. We're just looking at one thing this week. It's about bladeless wind turbines that work without any moving parts. How on earth is this possible?
Well, this is kind of moving on from what we discovered with the Turkish technology, where they had a kind of inverted umbrella, and the wind was hitting this inverted umbrella, and it was kind of bouncing around and generating electricity. And
yes, but that it was moving, wasn't it? There was kinetic energy.
Yeah, it had kinetic. It was a kinetic basis, and this is kinetic, but more on a molecular scale. What they're doing is they're creating an electrical field, and they're putting some droplets, water droplets in this case. They're ionizing the water droplets, and then what they're doing is they're pushing the water droplets against their natural flow to generate current. So what you're seeing in the video you're playing at the moment, they're basically, one option was to drop water out from a distance and kind of use the wind to blow it against the collector. But in the sorry, you've gone backwards there, haven't you?
I've gone backwards because I had no idea what the hell was going on, and I thought if I went backwards it might explain it. What's this? Is it water? What is it?
So they're dropping ionized water out, the plus signs you can see, and they're using the wind to carry it into a collector which is isolated, and therefore creating a current. But if you're going to do what they're proposing, which is much more sensible, is you strap the source actually on the, I think this is coming up in the movie now, you strap the source actually to the system, so you don't have to have something remote, so you're isolating the source, as you can see there. And it's going to be, I mean, I have no idea what the efficiencies are like. This is probably quite a lot less attractive than the bladeless system that you saw before, but it's interesting to see this, because this creates a real opening in facade technology, because as you can see in the picture, but well, actually in the video right now,
this is the collector, which is static.
Yeah, you can create these quite amazing shapes, and you can kind of create quite interesting, well, there you go, some more shapes. You can create some very interesting facade options.
Is it a square or an oblong or a circle?
Yeah, but you could imagine.
Oh, there they are in the water there.
Yeah, you can strap them anywhere you want, but you could imagine also this being strapped. They don't seem to have done this, but I was thinking how interesting it would be to kind of strap this in some kind of facades sort of element in building technology, so that you could use it for solar shading or anything along those lines.
Is that what's going on there? Have they got it up here?
They're just using the height. No, it's just the ones right at the top on the left-hand side there. They're just using the height to maximise wind speed.
Ah, very good. And do you think, I mean, the soundtrack to this video is sort of, as far as I can hear, pleading for money. Is this something, do you think, which will actually become a reality within our lifetimes?
This one, as I said, I'm less hopeful for than the Turkish one. That had a lot more sort of potential, I'd suggest, particularly with it utilising more understood, more traditional wind turbine. I mean, it's quite weird in itself talking about the traditionality of wind turbines. We're kind of at that age now. Wind turbines have been around for so long, but this is very newfangled technology, that's for sure.
Newfangled. I like the sound of newfangled. Talking of which, do we have anything else for the Tech Corner this week?
In terms of technologies, hang on a second. I shoved a few things on our Eco Reddit.
Well, look, if you've got, if you don't have anything, that's absolutely fine too. If you do have something related to wind turbines, I did pull up this sail-inspired wind turbine doubles efficiency without blades, and then realised, of course, we've already talked about it, haven't we?
Yeah, that's the
Turkish one.
That's the Turkish tech that we're talking about. I think we should definitely get some input from our listeners. That would be quite cool to talk about.
Oh, well, thank you very much for mentioning that, Kit. Actually, as we wrap up the show, when you talk about listeners, of course, this is a video podcast being shown on YouTube. But this week, we are now available on iTunes as an audio podcast. So all you iPhone, iOS users, iPad users, drop on by to the iTunes podcast store, and we're available for free. Of course, we don't charge, and it may have escaped your notice, but we are not ad supported. We do this for free and for the love of it. And Kit, any closing words before I wrap it up?
No, I certainly have a few more texts coming up next week, and be able to feed back a lot more on the other side of the Green Deal, which is, are we kind of educating the industry correctly? Are we going down the right route? Are we going to be supported in the construction industry? Because at the end of the day, all these technologies are all well and good, but they've got to be realistic. We've got to be able to install them and maintain them and utilize them correctly. So my concerns are focused on the back end of it, where we need to make sure that we're skilling up the industry correctly. So I think that would be a really interesting topic of conversation maybe for next week.
Great, and the Green Deal playing a big part in what we're talking about at the moment, so I'd be interested to hear that. And Kit, thank you very much for the show this week. That's a wrap. Tune in next week at 21:30 GMT for Ecotastic, and we'll see you then. Bye.
Looking forward to it. See you.